Good morning, everybody. It's that time again. All right, we've got our summary. Of course, we read our other summary last time, so we have a very short summary. The first one, we'll start bucket number 3, was a Pharaoh arose that did not know Joseph, and he enslaves the Hebrews. Short, to the point. Good thing. I like it. We'll just put it on top of it. We got a lot more books to go through in this bucket. I don't know if you noticed.
Yeah, there's that.
That's what we're doing in this one. This was the first 2.
The 2028.
Yeah, maybe. I'll talk faster.
No.
We'll get through it. There's a lot of good stuff here at the beginning of Exodus, so I've said it a few times. All right, so speaking of the beginning of Exodus, we started last time we did Exodus 1:17 through chapter 2, verse 15. So I didn't ask for a title last week, so I'll have to ask one on Slack this week. I got busy. I have no good excuse, just busy. Graduation party. But what happened? Let's do our storyline summary here. What happened in Exodus 1:17 to 2:15? Who remembers?
The midwives feared God and they let the boys live.
The midwives feared God and I didn't hear that.
Allowed the boys to live.
The boys to live. Very good, yes. Actually, I'm not just going to say midwives. I'm going to say Shiphrah and Puah, because I do think their names should be remembered. What was that, Mom?
I just said that they just went on a cruise.
Moses went on a cruise. That's true. That's a good way to put it. In his own little ark. Okay.
Budget.
What else we got? What about the end of it?
He was raised by Pharaoh's daughter.
Yes. Now, I would imagine since his mother was taking care of him early on, that she raised him till like 3-ish probably, at least. So I'm sure she taught him plenty about the Hebrews in that time. So she's like, I have a fixed window to do that. So I don't know how much you remember from 3, but I'm sure it made an impact. So. Okay. And was that the end?
He murdered an Egyptian.
That's right, it wasn't the end. Moses murdered the Egyptian who was killing Hebrew. Then what?
He flees the Midian.
Yes. Moses flees to Midian. So this is what I mean by there being a lot in the beginning of the Exodus. We did not do that many verses, but look at how many parts of the story we covered in that short period of time. Just one sentence and then the next thing moves on. All right, so he's in Midian and he sits down by the well. That's the end. Look good to you guys? Okay. Okay, we'll jump back into verse 16. Oh wait, we actually forgot when he spoke to the Hebrew who was oppressing his brother. That's an important one. I'll add that in post. I'll put it in there. Because we're going to see three things that are our introduction to Moses, and it's the killing of the Egyptian, and the speaking up against the Hebrew who was oppressing his brother, and this week we're going to see him standing up for the daughters of Jethro, when the shepherds would normally run them off. But last week we had a really great discussion around should we fear God or not. It was very good. And so I just wanted to bring that back up that, may every one of us be blessed enough to be described as a God-fearing man or woman in our lives. And a point that I failed to make last time, I got caught up in the conversation, is I do think it's important to understand that the only hope humanity has for less evil in this world is increasing the fear of God. That should be our number one goal as Christians, to increase the rest of the world's fear of God, because that's what brings them to the cross, and that's what keeps them from murdering the babies. Before we start though, we're going to get into an interesting section here where I think reviewing the names of God is going to really help clarify what we're talking about here. And so, in fact, as I read it, I'm not going to read what the English translates as God, the Lord, El Shaddai, or God Almighty, those things. I'm going to try to, if I'm good enough, stick in the actual Hebrew words because I think it adds a lot to the text. So if you remember the names of God, not with that marker. We had Elohim, and this is a plural word that meant spirit beings, it meant the other gods, it meant just gods in general, and it meant the God, capital G. That's the same word for all of those things. And you use the context, you use the sentence to figure out, I am is plural, it's like an English word ending in S. And so when you see this English word ending in S, this plural word, you have to use the context to decide which of these things is it actually talking about. But one thing that's interesting, I don't know if you've noticed, I brought up a lot of Hebrew words as we've gone, where I said the Hebrew word means multiple things. The traditional view of language, of human language, is that the progression of human language as it gets better is we get finer grained resolution on our words. So our words mean less of those multiple things and they come down to mean just the thing we're trying to say. And to some extent that's true. We get greater precision, but you also lose a lot of the, like, let me give you an example. The ancient Hebrew word for spirit was the same word for breath. And so they were able to say a sentence that could both evoke the idea of breathing and your breath as your life and your soul at the same time. And we can't do that, right? We have to say soul or breath or spirit or breath. And the same thing comes here with Elohim. There's a lot of times the actual other meanings of these things actually bring some of the meaning back to the text. The fact that the word does mean all of those different things. So the next one that you see is translated everywhere you see the Lord in capital letters. That one is God's name, Yahweh. We're going to get to that very soon. And then there is also God Almighty. You'll see that one. That one was El Shaddai. We don't really know what Shaddai means. I've listened to all the commentators explain how they're sure it means completely different things from each other. And so I'm not sure exactly, but that's how we translate it. God Almighty is El Shaddai. And then when you see the Lord lowercase, that is Adonai. The two biggest ones that you see the most are these two, Yahweh or the Lord and Elohim. Elohim is when you read that one, you should feel abstract creator of the universe, way beyond my understanding, right? Built everything. The Lord is the personal name. This is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the one who cares about us. This is when he's relating to you as a human being and saying, I am your God. So, I just wanted to make sure we started with that. So, verse 16 of chapter 2. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. The shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and saved them and watered their flock. And when they came home to their father Reuel, that's another name for Jethro, he's called several things throughout this text. When they came home to their father Reuel, he said, well, how is it that you have come home so soon today? I mean, this happens every day. They drive his daughters off. And they said, an Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherds and even drew water for us and watered the flock. And he said to his daughters, what? Well, where is he? Why have you left the man? Call him, that we may eat bread, or that he may eat bread. And Moses was content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moses his daughter Zipporah. And she gave birth to a son, and he called his name Gershom, for he said, I have been a sojourner in a foreign land. Because that word sounds like or rhymes with the word for sojourner in Hebrew. And so after this is our introduction to Moses. After this, we're going to see Moses talk to God, and if we're trying to figure out why does God pick Moses, it's his conversation with God doesn't go all that great. In the end, God gets kind of mad with him. So it's probably not that. It's probably these 3 little stories that give you Moses' character. The first one was killing the Egyptian torturer. So when he saw evil, he took action. The second one was when he spoke up when the Hebrew was torturing his brother. And so he took action, or fought, he spoke up. And the last one is when he stood up to save the Midianite girls. And so those are kind of the three things you can do in the face of evil. You can take action, you can speak up, and you can stand up. And he did all three. And those are the only three stories we get about him, right? Moses is so bothered by evil, he cannot sit by. And now you might understand why he would want to be a shepherd out in the middle of the wilderness of Midian for 40 years. Because if he can just get away from humans and sit out there with his sheep, he doesn't have to witness all of this bad that drives him to act every time. And you could have thought that the first one, the Egyptian, was just Moses protecting his own group. It was like a racial pride kind of a thing, because it was the Egyptian against the Hebrew. But then it was the Hebrew against the Hebrew, and he does basically the same thing. And so it's not just that. And then you think, but yeah, they're still Hebrews, they mean something to him. But then he's out in the wilderness. These girls mean absolutely nothing to him, right? He doesn't know them at all. They're not related to him. He just ended up at the well. He's tired, and he sees this, and he goes and actually protects them. He sees the injustice done to them and has to stand up against it. For people that can do him no right, or can do nothing good for him, right? A great way to evaluate people in life, your friends, potential spouses, is how do they treat people who can do nothing for them? And you would think, well, maybe he saw 7 pretty girls, and he was like Jacob at the well. You remember when Jacob was there, and Rachel came, and he was all of a sudden the big man, and he was rolling the stone away and telling everybody what to do. He doesn't even go home with them. He stays back. They have to go back and find him. He just goes in, saves them, pulls all the water out for their flock, and then leaves. Like, that's who Moses is. And so Reuel, of course, hearing the story of this guy with 7 daughters, none of whom are married, it's like, what are you doing, girls? Come on, bring him home. Why did you leave him there? So they go back and find him. And then it says, and probably the most unromantic line in the Bible is that then he gave Moses his daughter Zipporah, and she gave birth to a son. Now remember, Moses is writing this. He's not a romantic guy. He's very straightforward, to the point. You don't get a sense from this that he was a terribly great husband. It's not the love story that we saw with Isaac and Rebekah, right? That one was definitely like very touching. It's not the tragic love story we got with Jacob and Rachel that we walked through all that time. It's just, this is his wife. We don't hear anything else about their relationship except this really weird circumcision argument that comes later that most people have no idea what it means, myself included. And it does seem like she's not happy with him. It's possible that she might be, but that's it. He's also not a terribly great dad. His grandson ends up leading the worship of the idols in Dan. You don't actually hear, we read all about we're going to read, when we get to the names later on, we're going to read all about the sons of all these other people. You're going to read about all the sons of Aaron, and you never read about the sons of Moses. And the most reasonable explanation for that is they did not amount to much, because their dad was gone all the time, because he was busy. So he was not necessarily a great father, he was not a great husband, but he was a great man. I mean, he stands on the mountaintop with Jesus when Jesus is transfigured. You get Moses and Elijah, the law and the prophets, right? But you hope that he could have maybe done a little bit better with them, but that's the way the story went here. So, all right, so let's move on to verse 23. During those many days, the king of Egypt died. It's about 40 years. We learned that later. So he spent 40 years in Egypt, now 40 years out in the wilderness. And the people of Israel groaned because of their slavery and cried out for help. Their cry for rescue from slavery came up to Elohim. And Elohim heard their groaning, and Elohim remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. And God saw the people of Israel, and God knew. And we talked before about anthropomorphizing God. We're saying God remembered, God knew. And it helps us relate to God, but it sacrifices accuracy, right? When it says God remembered in the Bible, it doesn't mean he forgot. And now he remembers. It means now he's choosing to act. That's how we're describing the fact that he's acting on this right now. And when it says, and God knew, it's not that God didn't know before, right? He knows every hair on your head. He knows everything that's going on. None of the people at this time know that, though. For them, God, they don't have this book to explain God to them. And so he's just this remote thing that they've largely forgotten about. But it brings up a very difficult question. If God does know all the bad that goes on all the time, why does God choose to intervene at some times and not others? I mean, a very poignant one, why did he save the Hebrews here from slavery and he didn't save the Jews from the Holocaust? That is a big question the Jews have asked ever since that day. Why didn't they save us? Why didn't he save us then? Where was God? So many innocent people in the world have suffered so much. They've died torturous deaths. They've died in obscurity and for no good reason that any of us can see. And the people who hurt them never pay a price. And trying to figure out how we can have a good God and have evil that does not get paid back in this life is the question, is called theodicy. It's the question of how does we have a good God and still have evil? And the Rabbi Milton Steinberg pointed out, though, that the religious person, like, this is our question. We have to account for this. We don't have a perfect answer for it. And so we have to be aware of all of the nuances of this problem because it is our problem. But the atheist, so the religious person has to account for the existence of evil. But the atheist has to account for the existence of literally everything else. They have no problem with evil because there is no evil, because there's nobody that says what is right and wrong. But how did everything else get here? That's their problem. So, Dennis Prager made a really good point here. You could also just look within this story. You don't have to look across history and ask, why didn't he intervene earlier? Why couldn't he have taken them out of slavery 50 years earlier and had less babies drowned in the river, less, mindless suffering out there in the torturous slave camps? And he said, but think about that for a minute. No matter when he would have intervened, you could have asked the same question. If 2 people had, or if half as many people had died, you'd still be asking the same question. If 2 people had died, you'd still be asking, why wasn't it 1? If 1 person had died, you'd be asking, why did he have to die at all? Why didn't God intervene now? So the idea of why doesn't he do it earlier? Why doesn't he minimize the pain and death? You know what? It may be that it was supposed to be twice as many dead people, and the story we're reading is half. You don't know. And so, we're back to the same question. The question is equally as valid whether there's a little evil or a massive evil. It's the same question. Why didn't God act earlier? And so we're just back to this, how can evil exist if God exists question. Now, our Western movies, the entertainment we tend to get, our stories and everything, they fill our heads with the ideas of the underdogs who win, the bad guys get paid in the end, they all win, and the victims get justice. So we tend to expect that everywhere we look. That somehow in the end the bad guy is going to pay for what he did and they're going to lose. But that's just because of our movies. And that's not that our movies are wrong. Our movies should be like that. Because that is Christianity to its core. Rooting for the victim to get some justice is what Christianity is all about. And so if we're going to make movies, we better make them like that instead of the one where the bad guy just wins and you're left feeling terrible. Because there's plenty of that in real life. In real life, it's not like the movies. In real life, the poor 12-year-old girl who got abducted by the Muslim is basically raped and abused her entire life as his wife. And there's nothing she does about it, and she dies in obscurity. No one rescues her. And that happens every day, all the time, all over this world. A lot less where we live than the rest of the world, but it is staggering. You can't even look at it. The evil in the world is so bad that it's almost like trying to stare at the sun. And in the Bible, it usually refers to goodness as light and evil as darkness. But in life, we spend a lot more time staring at good, like we're staring in a dark closet, trying to make out shapes. But we can't look at evil. Evil is too hard to stare at. It's like being burned by the sun. And if you look at the book that's going to explain this question of theodicy to us, Dr. Bill Creasy, who's one of my favorite commentators, he points out that this part of this book, up to Job, basically has one message. If you do what God wants, it will go well with you. And if you don't, it won't. We keep seeing God say, do this, I'll reward you, and then the Israelites fall away, and then he has to punish them, and they come back, and he rewards them. And then we hit Job, and the message, like Job is giving that message to his friends. That's the message his friends are giving him. They're saying, look, Bad things happen to bad people, good things happen to good people. And Job is basically there like, I know that, guys, and yet it still hurts. And I don't know why this is happening to me. I don't feel like I was this terribly evil person. There must be something about God we don't understand. That explanation is too simplistic. Just good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people. And the rest of this book is to some extent answering that question. How do we understand that nuance and that complexity of why do bad things happen to good people? And so one of my favorite places to go, especially when I'm kind of plagued by evil and I'm trying to figure this out, is the prophet Habakkuk. So if you guys want to turn there with me really quick. It's right before Zephaniah, close to the New Testament. We're going to turn to Habakkuk chapter 1. Habakkuk is the prophet who asks God this very question directly. And so what was God's answer to Job? Job said, "Why, God?" And God said, "Who do you think you are, Job? Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Do you think you know as much as me? It's complicated and you can't understand it. And I'm sorry you have to suffer, but don't think you're better than me." And now we're going to see what he says to Habakkuk. The oracle that Habakkuk the prophet saw. "O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and you will not hear? Or cry to you violence, and you will not save? Why do you make me see iniquity, and why do you idly look at wrong? Destruction and violence are before me. Strife and contention arise, so the law is paralyzed, and justice never goes forth. For the wicked surrounds the righteous, so justice goes forth perverted." And God's answer is not what Habakkuk expected. God's answer says, "Look among the nations and see, wonder and be astounded. For I am doing a work in your days that you would not believe if told. For behold, I am raising up the Chaldeans." That's the name of the Babylonians. This is right before the Babylonians come and kill everybody and take them all. "I am raising up the Chaldeans, that bitter and hasty nation, who march through the breadth of the earth, to seize dwellings not their own. They are dreaded and fearsome. Their justice and dignity go forth from themselves. Their horses are swifter than leopards, more fierce than the evening wolves. Their horsemen press proudly on. Their horsemen come from afar. They fly like an eagle, swift to devour. They all come for violence, all their faces forward. They gather captives like the sand. At kings they scoff, at rulers they laugh at every fortress, for they pile up earth and they take it. Then they sweep by like the wind and go on, guilty men whose own might is their God." Do you think Habakkuk expected that? God's answer to why do you let evil happen is, you just wait, there's some evil guys coming you can't even imagine. And they are going to punish the evil guys you're complaining to me about, right? Habakkuk's living in Jerusalem. He's living in Israel, and he's seeing all the evil being done in Israel. And God says to him in response, justice is coming, but it's coming at the hands of evil men. That's not what you expected God to say. And so Habakkuk says back to God, "Well, are you not from everlasting, O Lord my God, my Holy One? We shall not die. O Lord, you have ordained them as a judgment, and you, O Rock, have established them for reproof. You who are of purer eyes than to see evil, and cannot look at wrong, why do you idly look at traitors, and remain silent when the wicked swallows up the man more righteous than he? You make mankind like the fish of the sea, like the crawling things that have no ruler. He brings all of them up with a hook. He drags them out with his net. He gathers them in his drag net, and he rejoices and is glad. And therefore he sacrifices to his net, and he makes offerings to his drag net, for by them he lives in luxury, and his food is rich. Is he then to keep on emptying his net and mercilessly killing nations forever? I will take my stand at my watchpost and station myself on the tower and look out to see what he will say to me and what I will answer concerning my complaint." So he's angry, and he says, "God, I'm going to sit here and wait until you tell me." And the Lord answered me, "Write the vision, make it plain on tablets, so that he may run who reads it. For still the vision awaits its appointed time. It hastens to the end, it will not lie. If it seems slow, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. Behold, his soul is puffed up. That's the evil man. It is not upright within him. But the righteous shall live by his faith. And so God's final answer to Habakkuk is, evil men will punish the evil men, and those evil men will be punished. But you, the righteous, you live by your faith in me. It's still not the answer we want. When you're suffering, it doesn't help the pain go away. But that's God's first answer. One of the best treatments of this topic I have ever seen is the opening monologue to the movie The Most Reluctant Convert. It was originally a play. And it was a story of C.S. Lewis's life. It was adapted from his book, The Problem of Pain. He has an entire book C.S. Lewis wrote trying to figure out this problem, theodicy, the problem of pain. It's fine. And so I thought I would just share that with you because it is a fascinating response to the atheist who is sort of not believing in God because of the problem of evil. And so this is as if C.S. Lewis were saying this to you, describing his life. It goes like this. When I was an atheist, if you had asked me, why do you not believe in God? I would have answered, well, look at the universe we live in. It's mostly empty space, completely dark, unimaginably cold. Most scientists think it improbable that any planet in our solar system besides Earth sustains life. And Earth herself existed without life for millions of years, and may exist for millions more once life has once again left her. And what is life? It is so arranged that creatures live only by preying on one another. In the lower forms, this means only death. In the higher forms, something called consciousness enables the living to experience pain. Creatures are born in pain, they live by inflicting pain, and they mostly die in pain. In the most complex of all creatures, man, yet another quality appears, reason, and by reason we can foresee our own pain. This we call suffering. We can foresee our own death while keenly desiring to go on living. Reason enables humans to invent hundreds of ingenious ways of inflicting a great deal more pain than we could have done as irrational creatures. This power we have exploited to the full. History is our record of crime, war, disease, and terror, with just enough happiness to give us an agonized fear of losing it. And when lost, the poignant misery of remembering how good it felt. Every now and then our condition is improved by what we call civilization. But all civilizations pass away. That our own civilization will pass away is surely probable. Even if it should not pass away, we're all doomed. The universe is doomed. The astronomers hold out no hope that this planet is permanently inhabitable. The physicists hold out no hope that organic life is a permanent possibility in any part of the material universe. Not only this Earth, but the whole show. All the suns of space are to run down. Nature is a sinking ship. So, if you had asked me to believe all this that I've just described is the work of an omnipotent, benevolent God, I would have laughed and said, well, the evidence points in the opposite direction. Either there is no God behind the universe, or a God indifferent to good and evil, or worse, an evil God. I never dreamed of raising the question, well, if the universe is so bad, or even half so bad, how on earth did humans ever come to attribute it to the work of a wise and good creator? Oh, men are fools, but not so foolish as that. The direct inference from black to white, evil flower to virtuous root, senseless work to a workman infinitely wise, staggers belief. No, I did not believe God existed, and I was angry at God for not existing. Why should creatures have the burden of existence forced upon them without their consent? I just thought that was fascinating. That is the opening monologue of the movie The Most Reluctant Convert. If you've never watched it, watch it. It's very good. And it is one of the most powerful arguments for theodicy I have ever heard. Yes, evil exists. We all agree on it. But if it does, how did we ever come up with the idea of an infinitely wise, infinitely good God? How could that have happened if there was no infinitely wise, infinitely good God? Maybe the answer is what we get in Job, that it's more complicated than it appears on the surface. So to answer our original question, why does God intervene at some times and not others? The real answer is we just don't know. God is his own agent, and he keeps his own counsel. He does not tell us why he's intervening a lot of the time. He does sometimes. In fact, in this case, he does tell us later why he chose now. He was waiting until the Amorites, remember that was the name for all the Canaanites, were fully evil. They had become like the people of the flood, essentially. They were fully evil. There was no good left. Now it's time to go invade. And so he does tell us here. It doesn't help you when you're in the slavery suffering, but he tells us why here. But in most of life, you only see God in retrospect, right? You only see why he answered why he acted in retrospect. Like we see now with the rest of the book, the plan of salvation, why he acted there, why he did all the things that he did. It makes sense to us, but it doesn't in the moment. And so we just have to learn to trust God through our struggles. The point is faith, what he told to Habakkuk. The righteous will live by faith. Trust that God knows what he's doing even through the pain. And so there is a question for each of you from this, and that is, will you trust God even if your problems don't get fixed? That, I think, is the question God's posing to every one of us. But there's an interesting part of what we just read back in Exodus. We're going to turn back there. That, the first 50 times I read it, it did not stand out to me. The Israelites are crying out, but it does not say who they're crying out to. They were not praying to God. They had forgotten God. They were just crying over their pain. And most likely, they were crying out to the Egyptian gods that they are so eager to worship once they get out, because that's all they've seen for the last 400 years. And this is why God sends Moses in to tell Pharaoh, the people need to come out and worship me in the wilderness for 3 days, because they've forgotten who I am. Moses doesn't even know who he is. He has to ask him, who are you? Right? So, alright, so now, starting out, Exodus 3. Now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. And Moses said, I will turn aside to see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. And when the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am, Hanani. And then he said, do not come near. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. And he said, I am the Elohim of your father, the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Isaac, and the Elohim of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at Elohim. That picture of the burning bush has actually become the iconic symbol of the Jewish people. They have been burned, but they're not fully consumed. And that's the bush that he sees out there. I wonder how long he had to look at it. How long do you have to look at a fire before you figure out that it's not actually burning the thing up? Or did the fire itself look kind of strange? Now, where is he? I'm going to say he was either here. So Midian, that's where this is the region he's settled in. He was either here or he was here. And unfortunately I can't tell you definitively because I looked up all the places people think Mount Sinai or Mount Horeb is, and there they are. So we don't really know where they are. That's just pick some mountains in the mountain range and call it good. I was like, I'm not going to study each and every one of those. But two of these make sense. So this one is the traditional. Jebel Musa right here is the traditional Mount Sinai. In fact, this here is called the Sinai Peninsula because they think Mount Sinai is there. Yes?
I saw a video one time, or maybe it was the one you sent at the very beginning, that they had Mount Sinai like blocked off or something like that. Because a group of people didn't want a whole bunch of tourists and everybody going to the mountain to visit, and they kind of have it private.
Yeah, you get that in the Middle East a lot because it's not Christians or Jews that actually rule any of this stuff. So the reason, if you think it's here, the primary reason to think it is here is that they crossed the Red Sea right here. That the Suez, basically right before the Suez Canal, is where the sea crossing actually happened. And so if you believe that, then essentially they gathered on this beach, they crossed the Suez Canal at its narrowest point, and then made their way through the wilderness to that mountain. That is the traditional place. Egypt, or the government right here, has built a military installation there. That may be what you're remembering, and you can't actually get to that point because they have a military base there now. I feel like that was on purpose. But anyways, they would have gone there to there. Now the one documentary I sent when we first started this class, they had a really interesting argument that actually the place they crossed the Red Sea is here, that this is the Red Sea. And they crossed at this place, Nueva Beach. So Nueva Beach to me looks a lot like how the place they gathered before crossing was described in the Bible. You have this big flat area capable of holding about 2 million people, and you have mountains on all sides with the little pass through the mountain. That would be how they came to get here. And the Egyptians are coming this way, and they're stuck. That makes a lot of sense to me. The other one doesn't look quite the same. But they would cross the Red Sea there, and if that's the case, then they think that this black-topped mountain that kind of looks like God burned the whole thing because of the underlying geology that's there is actually Mount Sinai. So I can't tell you which one it is, but there's definitely a mountain here that was Sinai that God's talking to Moses on. It's somewhere in this region. And if you look at where Moses would have been, either place, he's really on the very edge. You know, he would have been up in here. He's either traveled this far or he's traveled as far away as he can get out of Midian over here to Mount Sinai. So that's where we are. But on this mountain, the man is 80 years old. Right? He's been 40 years in Egypt, 40 years in the desert, and he's still tending sheep. He's near the end of his natural life for most people at that time. In fact, he's the one, when he's in his hundreds, that writes Psalm 90 that says the years of a man's life are 70 or 80 if he's strong. And so he's nearing the end of his life, and this is when God appears to him as an old man. And he tells him, you're going to go take the people out of Egypt. And he's like, I'm 80. But we do learn that holy ground is a real thing here, though. It's the first thing God tells Moses. And holy ground is weird to us. What in the world does that mean? But he says you need to take the sandals off your feet. You remember when Cain killed his brother, it told us that the ground itself soaked up the sin. The sin that was committed was soaked into the ground and it was polluted by the sin. Holy ground is ground that has been cleansed of sin. There was blood that paid the price, and now God can be there. If it's not holy ground, God can't be there. And so this ground has been cleansed of sin, and Moses, you got to take off your sandals because there's dirt on those sandals that was not cleansed of sin. So you have to have just your bare feet here. But I think what we're going to see as we get into Moses' conversation here is Moses does not know who this God is. He's just living in the backside of the desert. His father-in-law was a priest, so he's probably, the gods of Midian now. He's kind of given up on the Egyptian gods. And that's why he asks him who he is. And Moses' conversation, though, gives us the impression that Moses sees it as totally commonplace that a God would speak to a human. It must have happened a lot back then. But what is not commonplace for Moses' conversation is for a God to save anybody. Because how did you interact with the other gods? You sacrificed something you cared about, and in return they would give you power. You said, I want you, God, this other God, do this for me, and I will sacrifice this thing that means something to you, and then you give me power over the world around me. And this God is completely different. This God heard the cries of his people, no sacrifices, nothing they can do for him, and he comes to save them. And that Moses is surprised about. He's not surprised that he's talking to a God, but he is surprised that God is going to save his people. So what if this happens to you today? You're walking along and you see a burning bush. You see a spirit appear to you. What does the Bible tell you to do? It says, test the spirits. Moses tests God pretty strongly here. He's going to have 5 reasons why he shouldn't be the guy. But you don't just believe a spirit that comes along. God, in this case, has to prove that he's God, and God knows it. He does miracles for Moses to say, look, I am God. I am the God I say I am, and the miracles are my signature. So, verse 7. Then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land to a good broad land, a land flowing with the milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppressed them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? And he said, but I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve Elohim on this mountain. So Moses' first response to God is, who am I? Moses is described as one of the most humble people in the Bible. And that was his first question. Who in the world am I to do this? And you expect God to answer with his qualifications. Well, you slaughtered the Egyptian. You spoke up for the Hebrew. You helped the daughters of Jethro. God doesn't say a thing about Moses in his answer. Because God's answer really is, Moses, it does not matter who you are. What matters is who I am, and I will be with you. And that's what his answer to Moses is. But I am sure that Moses would have been happy if God would have given him a better sign. Because what was God's sign? God was like, Moses, you can trust me, don't worry. Here's your sign. When it's all over, you'll be standing on this mountain worshiping me. And he's like, well, could I see something now? Maybe? Right? Like, why is it only the thing I'm only going to know when it's done? And the reality is, almost everything is that way. You don't know anything for sure until it already happened. That's part of what God is saying to him. Is that's when you're really going to know for sure. Until then, you may be 90%, you may be 95%, but you're going to have some trust that what I tell you is what's about to happen. And isn't that the way it is in life? Most of the time you only see God in retrospect. You only see him when you look back on life and you see how he steered your life. It made no sense at the time. And that's exactly what Jesus told Nicodemus in John 3:8. When Nicodemus is asking him, how can these things be? Jesus says, the wind blows where it wishes, and you hear its sound, but you do not know where it comes from or where it goes. So it is with everyone who is born of the Spirit. So he meant we can only tell the Spirit by its effects. Only after the Spirit has acted and we look back do we see the rustling of the leaves in the trees to know that it had been there. But don't read our modern Christian mindset back into Moses. From Moses' perspective, he is speaking to an Elohim that he knows nothing about. All he knows about this Elohim is if these are his people, they've been in slavery for 400 years or for about 100 years under the Egyptian gods whose people are all prosperous. So clearly this God is not as great as the Egyptian gods. And this God is telling him, I am great, I'm even better than them. A, I heard their cries not even in my territory. I heard their cries way over in Egypt. And B, I'm strong enough to send you alone into Egypt and take them out. And the sign that you have is once it's done, then you'll know. He is asking a lot of Moses, but I think he knows that. That's why he continues to chat with Moses through this. There is a part here, remember those words we talked about that have two different meanings in the same word? So the word in Hebrew for what he says, that what the slaves are to Pharaoh, is avad. That's a servant, a slave. It's also the word for worship. So if you're worshiping a god, you're avading God. If you are a slave, you're an avad. If you're a servant, you're an avad. And he basically, there's an irony here that, in the Hebrew, that he is saying, please let the avad of Pharaoh come out and avad me. Be my slaves, basically. And you don't see it in the English because we translate it as different words. But it's a powerful message that Paul picks up in Romans 9, right? Paul tells us you're either going to be a slave to sin or a slave to God. And God says here, my people are either going to be a slave to Pharaoh or they're going to be a slave to me. And what is the purpose of their freedom? The purpose of their freedom is not just to get them out of bondage. Freedom is not the end in itself. The purpose of freedom was to serve God. Freedom untethered from that purpose becomes hell on earth. And that's what our founding fathers of our nation said. John Adams said, "Our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Freedom is not an end in itself. The point of freedom is to worship God." So before we get into what God's name is, I think we'll stop there, because that's going to be a bit of a discussion. And it's another one of those Hebrew words that has multiple meanings. And it's really deep. So come next time, I promise. You're gonna. If you've ever been confused, what in the world did it mean when God said, "My name is I am"? I promise, next week you will leave feeling a lot better. So, all right.